I was on a crowded bus when a pregnant woman demanded my seat. I have a hidden disability, but before I could explain, she loudly called me lazy and entitled. When I refused to move, she started crying, and now everyone thinks I'm a monster. Am I the a-hole? This happened yesterday, and I still feel a mixture of anger, shame, and uncertainty about whether I did the right thing. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, a connective tissue disorder that causes chronic pain, joint instability, and fatigue. On bad days, standing on a moving bus isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. A sudden stop could dislocate my knee or hip, sending me crashing to the floor and potentially causing serious injury. I don't look disabled most of the time. I'm 32, relatively young, and on good days I can move normally without anyone noticing anything different about me. I don't use mobility aids every day, though I do use a cane when my symptoms flare up. I've become accustomed to the disbelieving looks and occasional comments when I use handicapped accommodations. The "but you don't look sick" remarks have become a regular, if unwelcome, part of my life. Yesterday was particularly difficult. I had just finished a 90-minute physical therapy session that left me exhausted and in significant pain. My physical therapist had been working on my shoulder, which has been partially dislocating frequently, and the manipulation left me sore and vulnerable. I knew I shouldn't have scheduled the appointment during rush hour, but it was the only slot available for weeks. When I boarded the crowded evening bus, I was relieved to find one open seat in the priority seating section near the front. I sat down gratefully, knowing the 40-minute ride home would have been nearly impossible to manage standing. As the bus continued along its route, it became increasingly packed with commuters. People were standing in the aisles, holding onto rails and straps, pressed uncomfortably close together. I focused on my phone, trying to distract myself from the pain radiating through my shoulder and back. At one of the busier stops, a visibly pregnant woman boarded. She appeared to be in her third trimester, and I noticed her immediately. I also noticed at least 6 other people seated who looked perfectly able-bodied, young professionals in business attire who were absorbed in their phones or books. The pregnant woman made her way slowly down the aisle, glancing expectantly at seated passengers as she went. Nobody offered their seat. When she reached where I was sitting, she stopped directly in front of me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pointedly loud. "I'm pregnant. Could I please have your seat?" I looked up, about to explain my situation. "I'm sorry, I have a medical condition that—" She cut me off before I could finish. "You look perfectly fine to me," she said dismissively, her voice rising even louder. "I'm 7 months pregnant with swollen ankles and back pain. You're just being lazy." I felt my face flush with embarrassment as other passengers turned to watch the confrontation. I tried again, keeping my voice calm despite my humiliation. "I understand you're uncomfortable, but I have a disability that isn't visible. I just came from physical therapy, and I really need to—" "Oh, please," she interrupted again with an exaggerated eye roll. "Everyone has some excuse these days. Young people are so entitled. When I was your age, we respected pregnant women and elderly people on public transportation. It's just common decency." By this point, I could feel everyone staring. My heart was racing and sweat prickled at my hairline. This is exactly the kind of situation I dread, being forced to justify my disability to strangers while being publicly shamed. I hate having to defend my right to accommodations, to explain intimate details of my medical condition to people who often don't believe me anyway. "My disability is protected by the ADA," I said, my voice firmer now despite my discomfort. "I'm in serious pain and standing could be dangerous for me. There are other people on this bus who can offer you a seat. Please ask someone else." The woman scoffed loudly. "What disability? I don't see any cane or wheelchair. You're just making excuses because you don't want to be inconvenienced. Some of us don't have a choice about our condition." That last comment pushed me over the edge, as if I had chosen to have Ehlers-Danlos, as if I wouldn't give anything to have a body that worked normally, that didn't betray me with pain and dislocations on a daily basis. "You don't get to decide who's disabled and who isn't," I said, my voice shaking slightly with emotion. "You can't see my chronic pain. You can't see my joint condition. You have no idea what I deal with every day. And you certainly don't get to demand my seat after publicly mocking and belittling me." The bus had gone quiet, Everyone was watching our confrontation now. The woman stared at me for a long moment, her expression shocked, as if she couldn't believe someone had actually stood up to her. Then, her face crumpled. She placed one hand protectively over her pregnant belly and gripped the handrail tightly with the other as the bus lurched forward. "I can't believe this," she said, her voice wavering as tears welled in her eyes. "I'm carrying a child. I could fall and hurt my baby." Almost immediately, a businessman across the aisle stood up. "Ma'am, please take my seat," he said, shooting me a disgusted look as he moved into the aisle. The pregnant woman took his seat, continuing to cry softly. As she sat down, she looked at the man gratefully. "Thank you for being a gentleman," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "At least someone on this bus has manners." For the remainder of the ride, I sat rigid with discomfort, not just physical but social. An elderly woman muttered shameful as she passed me to exit at her stop. A group of teenagers a few seats behind me snickered and whispered while glancing in my direction. The businessman who had given up his seat stood directly in front of me, occasionally looking down with obvious disapproval. I wanted desperately to explain myself to everyone on that bus. I wanted to pull up my sleeve and show them the medical alert bracelet I wear. I wanted to take out my phone and show them the x-rays of my partially dislocated shoulder from last month. I wanted to lift my pant leg and reveal the knee brace hidden underneath. But I didn't. I just stared out the window and tried to become invisible. When I finally got home, I broke down crying. The physical pain, combined with the emotional humiliation, was overwhelming. I texted a few friends to vent about what had happened, seeking validation that I wasn't in the wrong. To my surprise, they were divided in their responses. Some firmly supported me, saying the woman had been entitled and ableist, and that I had every right to keep my seat. Others said that, regardless of how rudely she behaved, I should have given up my seat because pregnancy puts women at genuine physical risk on moving vehicles, and it would have been the bigger person thing to do. My roommate, who has seen me on days when I can barely get out of bed due to pain, said I was justified in refusing at first, but should have relented once the woman started crying. "Sometimes it's better to be kind than right," she said. My brother, who also has Ehlers-Danlos, was adamant that I had no obligation to risk my own safety, and that the pregnancy didn't automatically trump my disability. I keep replaying the situation in my mind, second-guessing my actions. Maybe I should have been more assertive about my disability from the start. Maybe I should have shown her my medical ID or my physical therapy paperwork that was in my bag. Maybe I should have asked the bus driver to intervene. Or maybe I should have just stood up despite the pain and risk, simply to avoid the public shaming and judgment. But then I think about the message that would send, that my disability is less valid because it's invisible, that I don't deserve the same accommodations as someone with a more apparent condition, that I should put myself at risk of injury to avoid making others uncomfortable. So, am I the a-hole for refusing to give up my priority seat to a pregnant woman after she mocked my invisible disability?